Welcome to Navigating Change, everybody, the podcast from Teibel Inc. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here with Howard Teibel.
Hey, Pete.
Howard, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Here we go.
In a world where Howard Teibel wants to talk about change. Inception, am I right?
Oh, my God. I'm right there.
Yeah.
I'm right back in that movie.
It was
I'm
that
Leonardo
good.
DiCaprio right now. I love that music.
I did. I found that for you.
I love that.
I found that for you, and I thought, this is something I need to share with you. It's going to be critical for our relationship.
That's beautiful.
How are you? How's your week? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling strong?
Yeah, it's been a good week. It's been an excellent week. And I head off tomorrow for Austin, Texas, which I love. And everything is good. But most important, we have a special guest, right?
We do. I'm very excited. Before we get to the big introductions, though, you gotta head over to learn more about Navigating Change at TeibelInc.com, where you can subscribe to the show in email or iTunes or your podcast app of choice, as well as find us on LinkedIn or Twitter, all that at TeibelInc.com.
Stop it.
This week, we're talking about empowerment, specifically what it takes to empower teams to take initiative. Our premise here is that lasting change comes in two parts. First, you have to have a clear vision of where you would like to go with a leadership team aligned behind that mission and strategy to get there. That's something we have talked long about on this show. But second, you have to have a culture that not only encourages, but inspires individuals to take action in support of that strategy each and every day. It is from this incremental daily action that sweeping institutional change emerges. So how do you lead from behind and mentor others to step forward? This week, our dear friend of the show, Andrew Menke, joins us from New Hampton School to help once again solve all leadership problems by empowering teams to act. Andrew, welcome back to Navigating Change.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be back on the show with you and Howard. A great pleasure.
This is going to be very exciting.
Wait, don't you love how he sets us up that you're going to have all the answers? He does this to me every week, Andrew.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, I got all the answers, right? You're going to have all the answers. Go ahead, Pete.
Trying to set the bar nice and
very
high for you guys. Nice and high.
Okay.
Howard, this one is I'm gonna put this one on you to start with, because you introduced us, and I believe you sent this to Andrew as well, this concept of the first follower. Yeah. And a video that I know that you have used. Do you want to introduce that concept and talk about how this has inspired you to have this conversation?
So basically, the first follower concept is about putting somebody or a group in front. You've got the vision, but instead of saying, I have to tell it, empowering those individuals to step forward and tell it for you. And this first follower video, the dancing guy, is a brilliant physical demonstration of it. I'd say in the workforce, in independent schools, in education, because of shared governance and because of the need to include so many others, it has a level of complexity that I think all leaders struggle with. But I think it's a worthy thing to think about. And, I think this is something that Andrew, in my working with him, has really put an emphasis on, which is how do I get my teams to step forward and lead? And Andrew, my sense is what you do really well with them is that you really encourage them to say, listen, I don't have all the answers. And not only that, I'm willing to experiment. Those two things I think are a critical success factor. Do you find that people hear you when you say that, or does it feel like people still sit on their hands when you put that out there?
No, I love the idea of the first follower. In fact, the first time I saw that dancing guy video, and I don't know what the vintage is on that, Howard and Pete, but Howard, that might be your vintage as I look at the grainy camera on that. I love that concept because you're very, very right to recognize independent school environments as very collaborative and transparent kind of environments in the way that we work together, certainly with students, but with colleagues. And the idea of that kind of empowerment. And I would go further to say that one of the elements of leadership that we really believe in increasingly here now in my 10th year is shared and distributed leadership. So that idea where there are so many different people and so many different capacities here who can take the lead, and they can be the person within the framework of the mission of the school and the articulated shared vision to take that next step to try to improve the environment and then bring people along with them. So for us and our leadership team, it's trying to build that kind of bandwidth, that willingness to take the risk in some cases to be the second person to join that person who is at the front. And sometimes that's the person who takes the biggest risk. And then you build, with the dancing guy, then you build a movement, and you build
Exactly.
that kind of energy and momentum that can take an organization, from the proverbial good place to a great place. So I think it's giving people opportunities as often as you can in every level of the enterprise, opportunities to step forward, and then encouraging people to have the courage to join them.
I want to jump in and give credit where credit is due. The video we're talking about, Dancing Guy, is courtesy of Derek Sivers, founder of CD Baby. He's a local Portland guy. Shout out to my people there. And this video is something he introduced in a TED Talk that he delivered. So we'll put links to both of the talk and the Dancing Guy video in the show notes for this episode. I think that the question for me, for either of you, is how do you then take this, and I like the way you said this shared and distributed leadership structure. How do you turn that into frontline inspiration so that people don't feel like in the Dancing Guy, to extend the metaphor, people don't feel how like it's that weird to step up and be number two? How do you build a culture that inspires people to be number two and number three?
Yeah, well, all I'd say, as you know, I've got a small organization, and I pay attention to that and see how when is the right opportunity to give someone an opportunity to step forward and try something. I just had a conversation today with Gail about that, and in some ways, what I realized was until I invited her to do it, it wasn't even a conversation that she was thinking about, and it's a bit odd. I mean, she's going to be remotely having to lead a conversation which I could absolutely handle it myself. But there's a part of me that says, if I'm going to develop my people, then I need to be very intentional, even if it has an element of feeling scripted, to say, I want to put you out front. But I'm not. To your point, Pete, I actually think it is awkward. If you're the first follower, that is, versus just the dancing guy, the shirtless guy, the first follower is a risky role. It takes courage to be the first follower. There's no way around that. Would you agree, Andrew?
Yeah, I would agree 100%. That's when you start to begin to ideally build traction for the quote unquote movement or the vision or the mission or whatever the initiative is that you're trying to move forward in a positive direction. So I think you're right. I just think, Pete, that the idea that we work with here at New Hampton is the notion of engaging as many people in the conversation, and sometimes those people include for us students, in the conversation about how we're going to move whatever it is, whatever area of the school needs improvement. And for schools that are devoted to getting better, that's probably all areas of student engagement, academically, residentially, because we're a boarding school, whatever the other areas are, and trying to involve as many people as possible in those conversations so that there is shared ownership. And I think when there is shared ownership and everybody has a stake in the outcome because they've spent time working on the outcome and what they hope it will be together, then I think it becomes easier to find people who are willing to step forward, Howard, as you suggested, and say, hey, I haven't seen myself as a person who is the dancing guy or is the person who is in a forward position of leadership, but I understand because I have shaped the initiatives going forward, that's important for me to do. And then I think it becomes easier then to have more and more people become that quote unquote first follower to step forward and say, hey, I too share the burden of moving this forward in a way that's going to move us closer to the outcome.
As you were speaking, I'm thinking, why don't we do this more often? It seems to me the reason we don't do what you just described more is because we're so focused on what we want to get done as opposed to how we want to get things done.
Right.
This is so much more about the how we want to operate. And I think most of us underestimate the power of focusing on how versus what. And we do this, we don't focus on it because we're afraid, we're so focused on getting things done quickly. And that's the challenge I seem to always have in talking with people, is you got to be willing to have patience.
Right.
To be able, but also some urgency. Otherwise, what's the motivation? I mean, I would imagine that, in your tenure as a leader at New Hampton, there are probably more things than not that you just led and you took it on yourself, and it just, in some ways, it's just easier to do.
Yeah, but I think that the traction, ultimately, the deep traction that you get is a lot less. So what we talk a lot about here is the intersection between process and product. And so probably like many people, I'm a big list maker. Have the yellow pad, have some going on my iPad.
Yeah, right.
The index card that fits comfortably in my shirt pocket, wherever I can write a note down to myself about something that I want to do. But in order for, I think, most organizations to realize deep and meaningful, which would be lasting change, heavy emphasis on process and building, again, that capacity, that bandwidth in everybody deeply in the organization to see themselves as a leader. And I think the only way to do that is to be very conscious of not involving necessarily everyone in every particular decision, but involving the right people in every sector of the school for whom the decision matters, because then you build the expectation that people are going to be in a leadership position. They're going to join that personal leadership position as a follower and understand deeply the how and the what and the why. And that process, I think, is really important. I can think of so many different examples here.
Curious to hear one, because lasting change, you just described, I think about keeping the trains running, which is really about silos and everybody's doing their own job. We have the people focused on the student. We have the people focused on finance. We have the people focused on enrollment. And it's very much a siloed kind of way of working. And then you're talking about bringing lasting change. What's an area for you where you go, if we really want to create, and I love this idea of deep traction, you using that terminology, where is this important to have happen in these education environments that you live in?
Well, I think back to that deep traction piece. I think there is what ultimately I think we're all trying to create is the kind of culture, especially I think in a school where it's a learning environment. It's an environment that should be devoted to constant improvement and evolution. So the adults, I think, have to model that each and every day in the way that they operate in terms of moving the school forward, so that students who are paying attention, as the two of you know, to everything we're doing all the time, are really understanding that this school that I'm part of is certainly, as I progress through the 9th, 10th, 11th grade, up through being prepared for college, through Algebra 1, Algebra 2, up through, IB, HL, math, that the place is about this huge commitment to growth. And the only way I think that ever gets done is if the adults are really committed to that. So
it's really practicing what you preach.
Well, yeah,
right?
And I think in a big way it is. And when I think about a train running on time kind of example for us would be, we went through a major calendar overhaul, and there's probably no more important currency for any of us, but especially true in a school, than time, in the way that we spend our time. And it may seem in a boarding school where there's unending amounts of time, but time is a real precious commodity for us. So when we went through that process, we tried to identify, based on the good work, Howard, that we've done with you, what is the problem or problems we're trying to solve, And then how is it that we put the constituents who are going to be most impacted by the calendar, and in our case, it was both a calendar and a schedule issue, schedule together so that they can begin to identify what some of the solutions would be through brainstorming exercises. So that for us, it could have been an easy fix for us to get the director of studies, the dean of students, the director of athletics, dean of faculty, and head in the same room and hammer through to a point of completion on the calendar and a schedule. But we chose to bring students, a couple of parents, faculty, and even
so how did that influence? How did involving these other constituents alter the outcome or the thinking? Because I think that's really interesting. I think there's more of that has to happen. It's like students are not involved enough in administration or academic change, and because we think we know what they need. So when you introduce them into this process, how do you think that helped the process?
More than anything else, this is back to the process piece. It reinforced a culture of collaboration, of inclusion, of expectation for the responsibility of improvement. And everybody's got to roll up their sleeves and lean in if we're going to get better. And that's just not going to happen otherwise. So that's one. It was a reinforcement, I think, of a culture that I was lucky enough, I think, to inherit here and try to steward going forward. But from an outcome standpoint, it helped us to better understand the kind of rhythms and routines of students. So there were a couple of mornings that we changed our start time, as an example. Now we can't, like many schools, we can't necessarily subscribe to all of the sleep science around starting classes at 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning. We would have a difficult time getting everything done that we would like to get done, but we were able to start a little later on a couple of days, abbreviate some days, and be sensitive to the ways in which students were being impacted by the calendar in the same way and the schedule, and thinking about similar implications to faculty members who are also parents of young children. That's very difficult. You introduce all of those voices, as the two of you know, and it just exponentially complicates getting to the solution. But ultimately, if all of us, and there are some challenges, I think, that don't lend themselves well to that deep collaborative work. If there's something that is more emergent that's got to be decided right now, then you kind of fall back on a directive leadership style, which says we got to get this thing down now. We have to get a few people in the room and make the decision. But I think often my experience here has been we got through some of the directive work that needed to be done early in my time here, and now are in a place, I won't say of luxury, but of being able to be more patient and continue to help the school community to know that that we all get better as a result of each individual's effort in pushing the agenda forward.
You talk about bringing in students and parents into this process. You find yourself learning anything about your constituent audiences that surprised you? Besides, I think one of the more, it strikes me that it may have been predictable when people come and say when students say we should start later. That may not have been a huge surprise, but anything that surprised you in particular about the process as you invite these additional constituencies to the table?
I think I'm always reassured about the sensitivity to what I would call, and put quotes around, institutional needs. I think I am always very, very impressed when there is an assumption at times where all of us are going to represent our own kind of self-centered needs. And part of the reason you bring a constituent in is to represent that constituent's needs. And so if it's a student, you would hope that it's a student voice and a parent voice. But there's a great deal of respect for, I think, inherently when you bring someone into a process where they are grateful to have been brought into the process. And so there's what I don't know if I was surprised by, but again, reassured by, is the balance between, here's what I think would be most beneficial for, fill in the blank, the student voice or the parent voice or the, worker faculty person who's got 3 young children, who's shuffling between daycare, the balance between those individual needs and the institutional needs. And it's the same kind of balance, I think, that we all try to strike between the product. We're trying to get to an outcome and the process, and being patient enough to hear those voices, because it goes right back to reinforcing the idea that your voice is important. And if people really believe that, and there's evidence for it, then it becomes so much easier to have somebody willingly step into the leadership role on large and small issues. Has somebody much more willingly say, I believe in, and have had reinforced for me over and over again that my voice is important, and therefore that risk of being the first follower is much more tenable to me, because I know the school cares about my voice and my participation, and to me, it all comes back, or so much of it comes back, to a level of ownership. If you ask people their opinion, you engage them in the process of conversation and building whatever the solution is, there is much more likelihood that somebody's going to step in and say, "Okay, I got skin in this. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and be that first follower. I'm going to be the person who's going to be the third one in, but I got work to do here, because this is a large part of this thing is mine."
Yeah, but I think what's interesting about this idea of getting people to be first followers is that more often than not, my experience is people won't step forward unless they're truly invited in. It's this interesting disconnect in that the people who are leading, or have people that report to them, have a presumption very often, and I see this in myself, is I thought I communicated that I'm looking for engagement. Why isn't it happening? And I think we underestimate the cultural pull that we all have to wait to sort of understand what is it that's being asked of me. There's an interesting distinction between leading people and managing people, and I've been talking more about this these days, this idea that managers manage tasks and leaders lead people. Leaders don't have subordinates. Leaders have followers, and sometimes I think we confuse the need to say, I want you to do something because I said so and I'm the boss. And sometimes people need that. And too often I think we fall into, if the title of this podcast is Empowering Teams to Take Initiative, I think that's a worthy thing to focus on. The danger of this I've seen is that the person who has the authority to say, I've heard everybody, here's what we're going to do, here's the hill we're going to take. You can't give up that responsibility, even if you're empowering your teams. And I think that's one of the inherent dilemmas, is that we don't keep both focuses front and center. In the same initiative, we have to be willing to say, I want this to be an engaging process. I'm interested in what you all think. But we also have to, as their leader / manager / being in charge, we have to be willing to say to people in the room, I'd like us all to do this. I've heard everybody, and I want us all to do this because I say so.
No, I think you're right. And we did, and I may have told you this, Howard, we did a little bit of leadership development work with an organization called the HAY Group, HAY Group, and had what I call a friend of the school come in and work with us to try to identify natural proclivity and leadership styles. And so one of mine is naturally, and maybe this is not a surprise to you, is the directive style. So that's the person who comes in and says, hey, I think in very short order I have identified the problem or opportunities, and here's what we should do. And, let's have a short meeting here to get the strategy in place to execute the try to solve the problem, and we'll move on. And so there is, I think, a danger in the following your natural style. I think that is what you're inclined and wired to do, and then moving kind of to the other side of or the pendulum swing, which is, well, let's get together and we'll have a discussion on each and every decision that we're going to make and include everyone. I would just say that there are, and maybe it's just the evolutionary life of somebody like me who's been here for 10 years. I found that early on in my time here, there was more reason, partly due to urgency, and partly due to the circumstance of me being new. There were more circumstances where I found myself saying, I think we need to do this. And I have a tendency to say, I think we need to do this. What are the 3 or 4 solutions that can help us to achieve that goal?
So you know what I like about that? What I really like about that is, because I was just thinking as you were describing your natural style, my guess is for you, practicing patience is something that's really important, but the way you offset that is by both saying, here's what I think, here's where I think I'd like us to go. What are 3 or 4 ideas? And to me, that is a really great bridge between being directive and also being collaborative.
Right.
And I love that. That's a really good lesson for anyone listening, is this idea that is to find language that allows you in the same kind of conversation to be able to demonstrate both leadership from a directive perspective and then leadership from a, I care what you guys think, and I know I don't have all the answers. And I think that's a critical takeaway here.
The big takeaway for me is, and I don't know that it's necessarily been satisfied here, is this idea that, if we go back
Not
to
satisfied, you're going to really push us now.
I am.
You?
Well, I am.
On.
This
Come
is
on,
the thing.
do it. Push the envelope.
We are talking here about inspiring teams to take initiative. Well, isn't the objective then to have so well communicated your, the high level mission and values of the institution that you really do, as you say, Howard, that you really do get people coming to you saying, I'm ready to take this on, or I had an idea about what we need to do next. I have an idea for the next big thing, rather than look at this from a perspective of your leadership style, whether it's, authoritative or inclusive. It's more of a question of how have you institutionalized a culture of initiative, of saying anyone in the institution has the creativity, the ability, the knowledge, skills, and abilities to take on an initiative that fits inside of where we want to go, of our path.
All right, so here's my take, and I'm interested in your take too, Andrew. And I don't think this is being cynical. I think this is recognizing we have to keep making the opportunity available, but it's going to be the case that a subset of the larger group you're inviting into this conversation will step into it, and the majority will not. And I think that's just the nature of the game. I love the idea that everybody will step in, and everyone will be entrepreneurial, and everybody will feel connected. But I think the reality of organizations is that you've got people who are champions. You will have a second group that is the majority that will go along, but they need to know why. They need to see the benefits, and you need to find a way of engaging them. And then you'll have a small minority that will not go along, that are not interested in change, and so on. And I think what we have to do is make this available so more people can step into being champions. But the reality is it's a minority. And I would love the idea that more people take advantage of this. But in practical terms, I think that, so we don't find ourselves feeling like we failed, if we can get a few people to step up to help lead others, I consider that success. Andrew, what's your experience of what really happens when you make this invitation?
And if you want to call Howard out on being incredibly cynical and kind of a hater, you're more than welcome to do that.
I'm hanging up, Howard.
There we go. Oh, let's go back. You're right. We can do it all. You're absolutely right, both of you.
I do, to work with adolescents. So I spent the last 3 lunch times meeting with all of our seniors. And I am very, very optimistic about our future. Are all of them going to be the dancing guy or first followers? I sure hope so. And I'm going to believe that they are. And we'll try to track every single one of them, in their adult lives. So I have unending optimism, maybe just by virtue of the work that I get to do all day and every day here with faculty who really care about students. Do I agree that there are folks who are naturally inclined to be comfortable more so than others stepping forward? Absolutely. I think there's a certain element of human nature that plays into all of this. But I think culture trumps all of that. And Pete, I think your question is a really good one to hold us accountable for actually addressing the topic of the podcast, which is how you build that kind of culture of initiative. And that's truly, I think, a major challenge. But when you get it, and maybe Howard, this speaks to what you said, you see it in small increments as people move into positions of opportunity with ideas. So, but I still think for me and for us, it has a lot to do with getting people in a place where they have an opportunity to weigh in on that shared vision and mission. So,
and all I'm saying is that we shouldn't consider it a failure if a couple step up and help pull the majority. And what I see a lot of is, and again, I've been doing this long enough that I try and balance wanting to inspire people to think it's possible that we can have it all. But I also think we can shoot ourselves in the foot if we have a couple step forward and somehow we think that in itself is not an example of success. If we can get a few people, and again, more the better, but if we can get a few people to help tell our story and then get others to feel encouraged that it's safe to be part of that story or to go along with the change, I think that's success.
Well, and I think that gets to such a point. That's why I'm so interested in Andrew's take on this, because when you look at an independent school, looking at these kids who I mean, that's a constituent audience that has a considerable investment in their community. They live there, they go to school there. That is investment, and I think that seems to me to be a key indicator. The higher the degree of investment you're able to cultivate in the community, the greater the degree of initiative you're going to see out of the community.
Well, my guess is, Andrew, that and I think it is true. I think that especially with the way you conduct your school, you run your school, there is such a high focus on engagement, and the amount of faculty engagement with students that you probably see all the time, a high level of participation. I think what happens as we become adults and we sort of have to get work done on the administrative and academic side, we fall into a way of thinking that I'm always pushing against, which is, how do you think of yourself as a lifelong learner? I'm trying to get people to come back to thinking about themselves as a student. And what's so hard about that and interesting is most people get attached to, here's my job. And I think what you're talking about, and I talk a lot about, is how do we get you to step back from doing it the way you do it and say, how can we do it better? And I think that mindset has to do with untraining them to it's sort of getting back to that student mindset, which you get to see every single day in the students you're cultivating. That's hard, and it's important to do.
Yeah, I think it is really hard. And Pete, I liked your word, the investment piece. How is it that you invest people enough of the right ways and enough of the right conversations? Part of that, I think, too, Howard, is any one of us in leadership positions. How willing are we to take the kind of risk that we want others to take?
Yes.
Be it stepping out of our comfort zone and showing people that there is a great value in stepping into a place, in our case, in our school, almost literally, and saying, hey, this is an area that I'm not as comfortable in, and it. My colleagues would know it. But I'm going to put myself in a position of exposure because I know that's going to help me to grow. And how do you create an environment that's safe enough to allow people to do that? Part of the way that you do that, I think significantly so, is to do it yourself. I'm not saying do all the work yourself.
You mean demonstrate it, show
very tangibly,
leading by example.
Very tangibly, yeah. So, I think that getting up from our desks and showing people that you care, being in a place where there's a great deal of awareness of personal investment for us in the classroom or in the dormitories here or wherever it might be on campus. I just think that that people respond to the demonstration very tangibly of modeling, and it's hard to, I think, replace that. You can stand up in front of people and say, read this article, go to this workshop, have Howard come in and beat you about the ears. But I think it's very, very important, I think, and it's not just the chief leader, the president or CFO or CEO or director of studies here for us. It's many people in many different leadership positions, showing people that they know, that they care, that they're going to be in that position of constant learning. And I think there's a great deal of power in that kind of modeling.
Boy, I would have loved to have had the experience of going to boarding school, and I didn't get that. You didn't go to boarding school, did you, Pete?
I certainly did.
You did?
I did.
Good for you.
Yeah,
my parents didn't know that it was, there was a certain, we didn't have families and friends or that had the experience. But Andrew, I'd love to go to your school. Am I too old, you think, to be a?
No. We're going to start a continuing education segment.
No, don't. Just make him start as a freshman, Andrew, please.
You could be the first.
God, is that a scary image?
That is. I'm finding a roommate for Howard.
And I want to end the show on that message, and I almost want to just stop recording at that, but we do have to do some end notes here. Andrew Menke, thank you so much for joining us all the way from New Hampton School in New Hampshire. Anything you have going on at New Hampton you want to talk to us about or send people to learn more?
Certainly go to the website, www.newhampton.org. Wonderful resources about the school there. And we have graduation in 2 weeks. So we're very excited about that event, and lots of great things going on here on campus. But I'd love to have people visit the website.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Andrew. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Howard, my friend, great conversation. Thank you. You're off to Austin.
Off to Austin. But, I got to tell you one last thing, because I just spoke at an independent school conference. It was for CFOs. It was the New Jersey Association of Independent Schools. And what's fascinating for me, more I do this with independent schools, is how easy it is to get any role on the administrative side to connect with how much they care about the school. And it's interesting, we get so caught up in our especially for business officers, we've got to focus on the financial sustainability. But Andrew, what's so wonderful in working with both your school and other schools is just seeing how easy it is for people to get personally to actually present how much they care about the work. And I think that's one of the things, Pete, I want to see. I want to see us talk more about, when I'm in places, is that we get people to air how much they care and step back from sort of the mechanics of the work, because I think that inspiration is what gets people to invest even more. And it's all in the background. There are some roles of these institutions that are front and center, and you can see that they live the mission on their sleeve. And then there's other roles that we have to work a little bit harder. So I work a lot, as you know, in higher education, and I think it's harder in higher ed because it's more complex. There's many more administrative functions. Independent schools have such an opportunity to teach what it is to stay connected to mission and still get our work done. So I love working with these schools.
That's a good way to kick it off. It's a very powerful message. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you again, Andrew and Howard. On behalf of these two fantastic gentlemen, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you next week on Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc.